I really enjoyed today. It's been very nice to meet everybody, and it's been a very fun day. I've met some really lovely people, and I've enjoyed doing the work with people, and feeling like I can make a difference. So just thank you to everybody for inviting us here today. Thank you. Cheers. I just wanted to say something.
Oh yeah, it's always important.
Yeah. Thanks, mate.
Thank you.
All the best to you.
Cheers.
What is it that we're actually launching? Well, we're launching a report which says how well disabled people's rights under the United Nations Disabled People's Convention, or UNCRPD, are being met in Scotland. The convention itself details explicitly the rights that disabled people have and what governments need to do to make sure that we get our rights. The UK government signed up to that convention in 2009, and in doing so it agreed that the government at Westminster and the devolved governments in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland would deliver disabled people's rights as they're outlined in that convention. So our report says how well the government is doing in delivering on that promise. The report talks about both the Scottish government. Sorry. Excuse me for going backwards and forwards to my computer there. It talks about both the Scottish government and the UK government because they are responsible for different policy areas which affect the lives of disabled people living in Scotland. And the report says what needs to be improved so that disabled people's rights are delivered effectively in Scotland. In our report, we comment on 22 of the articles or rights in the convention. And although it is really difficult to tell you what the priority issues in the report actually are, because everything is so important, everything impacts on disabled people's lives, and actually everything is quite interconnected as well. When you look through the rights, they all have an impact on each other. But I'm going to tell you three things in the report that I think really stood out, and that also seem to be concerns that we share with disabled people throughout the rest of the UK. So one of those issues was that disabled people have been losing social care as funding is reduced, and that the experiences of people who are receiving social care are very, very mixed depending on whereabouts in the country they live. And adding into that, in the transition attendance payment, we've seen a lot of disabled people having their payments reduced or stopped. And so actually overall there's been a reduction in the resources that disabled people have to make sure that they can live independently and be included in the community. In the report, we've also been really clear that disabled people's standard of living and their health has been severely, unfairly, and we think avoidably impacted as a result of welfare reform policies, and that has brought about circumstances which threaten or in some cases end people's lives. We've also noted, of course, that there is a departure in Scotland in terms of the approach to disability benefits, and we're looking towards a system which really has respect and dignity at its core, and we're very hopeful about what that means. We talked about the accessibility of transport and housing, and that's still inadequate, and that's really an ongoing issue, as a lot of people will be aware. But to give you a flavour of where we are currently, we currently have 201,000 households in Scotland that can't access essential facilities in their own home. And we're seeing a lack of consultation often with disabled people when public spaces are being designed, and that leads to accessibility issues later on. There's also some other important issues in the convention. All the issues, as I say, are important, but my colleague Steve will speak directly to one of the other issues that we've raised that's really significant. So why did we write the report? we didn't just write the report so that we had it. We wrote it to influence the actions which the government will take in relation to the issues that we've highlighted in the report. So I've mentioned that the UK government signed up to the convention in 2009. Now, when a government signs up to the convention, its performance in implementing that convention in its country is reviewed by a United Nations committee every 4 years. So our government, when the government is reviewed, it's asked to report on how it is upholding and advancing the rights in the convention. And disabled people are also asked to report on how things are going, so the committee won't just take the government's word for it, it'll look to hear from disabled people as well about how they think the government is performing. So our government is now up for review. Disabled people in Scotland and throughout the UK have submitted their reports. We submitted ours at the end of January to the UN committee. And the next step is that the committee will meet with representatives from disabled people's organisations and human rights organisations throughout the UK to talk about the issues that have been raised in the report. So that meeting is going to happen this coming Monday at the UN in Geneva in Switzerland, and myself and my colleague Steve from People First Scotland will be at that meeting representing the Scotland report. After that meeting, and when the committee have heard from us, they'll come up with a list of issues, and that list of issues are the issues that the committee thinks are the priorities for action for the government, so the things that they really want the government to address to better deliver disabled people's rights. We expect that the committee will come up with that list by around the 20th of March. The list will then be sent to the UK government and its devolved governments as well, and they'll have 3 months to respond to that list. At this point, disabled people can also respond to the list of issues and submit further evidence to the committee. Once the state has responded, once the government responds, in summertime they'll attend a review with the committee where they'll discuss the issues, and they'll discuss further issues as well, and they'll discuss their response to the issues that the committee have highlighted. And the committee will then make recommendations to the government about what it needs to do to better implement disabled people's rights from the convention. So that's a little bit of a whirlwind tour of the process, and I hope it's been clear, but please do let me know if there's anything that you want me to clarify. I'll walk around the room all throughout the event, and I'm really happy to chat to anybody who has any questions about that process and about the report and about how we're going to be using it. So just to say a little bit then about how we actually got to where we got to with the report. So we started off with Inclusion Scotland and 9 project partners who formed a steering group. And our project partners are all listed up here, and they are People First Scotland, Voices of Experience, the Glasgow Centre for Inclusive Living, Glasgow Disability Alliance, the Lothian Centre for Inclusive Living, the British Deaf Association, the Scottish Council on Deafness, Self-Directed Support Scotland, and Professor Nicholas Watson from the University of Glasgow. And I'm personally very grateful to everybody who contributed to the report through the steering group. Our steering group conducted focus groups and consultation events with disabled people across the country. They submitted evidence to be used in the report, and they looked over drafts and commented on drafts of the report as well, so it was very much a joint effort. So this started off with 10 organisations in Scotland, and we wrote the Scotland report. We also wrote a report covering Great Britain. We received funding from the Equality and Human Rights Commission and the Scottish Human Rights Commission, and we partnered with Disability Rights UK and Disability Wales to submit a report about the state of human rights in Scotland, England and Wales. So that report was also submitted. And now for attending the meeting at the UN, we've had to work with a variety of different organisations throughout the UK. So here's where we are currently. We're now working, I've not actually counted everything up yet, but as you can see from all the logos, a really broad range of organisations, including members of the Reclaiming Our Futures Alliance in England and Disability Action Northern Ireland, who have also submitted a report. So we've all been working together. And that's not all. We've also been working with the independent monitoring mechanisms for the UK. So that includes the Equality and Human Rights Commission and the Scottish Human Rights Commission here. They'll also be in attendance on Monday at the session with the UNCRPD committee to give their reports on how things are working out in the UK and Scotland. And we've been fortunate enough to coordinate also with the International Disability Alliance. That's an organisation based in Geneva that helps disabled people's organisations who are attending to speak to the committee, to organise and to make the most effective use of their time with the committee. So there's a lot of people who've been involved in this process. So what is significant about it? I just wanted to say a few things about what is particularly significant about having written this report and going to speak to the committee in Geneva. As some of you might be aware, it's now 4 months since the UN committee, which oversees the Disabled People's Convention, published findings into its inquiry into the UK. The UK, they launched an inquiry for grave and systematic violations of disabled people's human rights. So that's 4 months ago. The inquiry has meant that the review that they're about to go through, the government's about to go through, was delayed. We expected that review to happen in 2015 and had prepared a report for that back in 2014. This is actually the first time that the committee will have reviewed a state that it's previously also had under inquiry. So we've got a little bit longer than normal with the committee. We've got double the amount of time we would otherwise have had. It has also meant that there are a lot of organisations interested in the process, and a lot of disabled people's organisations will be in attendance on Monday. And the committee have had an awful lot of evidence submitted from the UK. They've had over 1,000 pages submitted from disabled people's organisations, so they've got a lot of information to process, a lot of voices to hear, so it should be a really interesting meeting on Monday. And it's also been really significant because there have been a variety, as you saw from previous slides, of disabled people's organisations and human rights organisations from across the UK coordinating together in advance of this process to get the best outcomes for disabled people that we possibly can when we attend that meeting on Monday. Everybody in the UK delegation is really committed to advancing disabled people's rights throughout the UK, and so it has been a great pleasure to work with all these organisations. So just to recap a little bit on what we actually hope to achieve when we come back after we've been to Geneva. We hope that the UN CRPD committee identifies the issues that are most severely impacting the lives of disabled people across the UK and asks the government to respond to those issues. So we want to make sure that they have the right list of issues to put to our government. And although when the committee published the findings of their inquiry, the response from the UK government was disappointing, to say the least. However, it's really important that we engage in those processes and that we attend these meetings and submit our reports and try to impact the position of the UK and Scottish governments. It's important that the government knows that we are there, that we're aware of our rights, and that we're willing and able to demand them. And it's also a good opportunity as well to look at what we can do in Scotland to make sure that our human rights position, that we can lead the way in terms of disabled people's human rights and really have a country which has dignity and respect at its heart. So I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Steve Robertson from People First Scotland, and he's going to speak about his role in contributing to the report and about some of the issues that he will be taking to the committee on Monday.
Hello everybody, as Rosalind said, I'm Steve Robertson. For those of you who don't already know me, I'm a director of People First Scotland. People First is the disabled people's user-led organisation for adults with a learning disability in Scotland. I'm also the chair of the Law and Human Rights Group within People First Scotland, and that means I've had a lot of direct involvement in the development of the Shadow Report that we're here to launch today. So, I also sit on the UN CRPD steering group, so that's something that is also as well. And I'm delighted to say, delighted to be involved from the very start of the project. And we've held focus groups where our members described their lived experience or experiences, and members from lots of our groups, which meet across Scotland, answered survey questions to feed into the process. So it's like information gathering about whether people's rights are being met or not. The day-to-day life of people with learning disability in Scotland includes so many different aspects, where our human rights and our rights under the Convention are ignored. One of the main policy issues for us is that any person who is labelled as having a learning disability can be subject to a guardianship order which removes their right to make decisions. And this report describes the breach of Article 12 of the Convention, which exists when guardianship removes decision-making powers from an individual. The report also asks Scottish Government to do more to facilitate supported decision-making. And we believe supporting someone to make decisions involves considerable skill and time. Time being that different people can take different lengths of time to understand things. So it shouldn't be a one-cap-fits-all. There is such a range of decisions to make in life. Some can be straightforward and might happen every day, and some probably only take place once in life, but can have an impact on almost everything for the rest of your life. The continued increase in welfare guardianship, particularly for people with learning disability, is of a real concern to us. As we have direct experience of former directors of our organisation having to step down from that role when the orders have been placed on them. And that's just because people, if they're under order, have been deemed need to have the capacity to understand, therefore they can't sit on a board. Yeah. It's unfortunate, but I mean, we can't do anything about that.
At the moment.
Continuing our partnership work with Inclusion Scotland, we will take issues from the report to the United Nations Committee in Geneva next week, as Rosalind's touched on. We will work with Inclusion Scotland and other disabled people's organisations from across Britain. For my part, I will be asking them to look in particular at the issue of guardianship that I've just mentioned. And I just wanted to say it's something that we feel very strongly about. So many other issues within the report also affect our members. So of course our involvement has been and is very important to us. People First Scotland also have strong links with other People First groups across the world. Robert Martin, who is a founding member of People First New Zealand, and Robert is the first person with a land disability ever to be appointed to a United Nations committee. And we have been fortunate enough to be in contact to congratulate him, and we will continue to update him on our work. We will have further contact with Robert once he has got started in his role at the committee. Unfortunately, he officially begins his work there just shortly after our trip next week. However, although we thought that would mean that we wouldn't see him, we've now found out that he may be attending the session as an observer. So if that is true, we should have the chance to catch up with him after all, and that would be great. So today, we'll let us have a think about the report, and that's me. So let's get cracking. Thank you.
Okay, hi everyone. It's brilliant to see such a wonderful turnout for this. I'm Sasha from Bellafreak, which is part of the kind of creative side of Disability History Scotland. And I'm here with Alex and Stuart, who they'll talk a bit about the actual activity and how we're going to work with that. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about the history of the technique that we're going to be using today, which is called cut-ups or cut-outs. Right? So, in some ways, we've come full circle because cut-ups began as a technique by a group of radical artists who actually started working in Switzerland in 1915. So they began in Zurich. The report is going to be heard in Geneva, and we've kind of gone right round 180 degrees. Now, the group of artists that actually began the cut-up techniques were called the Dardarists. They were radical, they wanted to protest about the World War I casualties. What they saw was a complete waste of people's lives, and in ways that, I suppose, helped them to actually come to terms with what was going on and really kind of speak out. They began using cut-up techniques, collages, art, paintings, sculpture, any way that they could to express their horror about World War I. And one of the paintings up here is a cut-up technique. The first one at the top is by an artist called Otto Zitz, and he produced that using cut-up techniques. It's a group of disabled people who have been injured during World War I. Underneath it is a collage, again cut up images of an air raid, and the Dardarists use these techniques in a way that really kind of changed the artistic landscape of Europe. Now, cut-ups really took off again in the 1950s and 1960s. This dude is William Burroughs. I mean, he's one of the most super cool guys from the American Beat generation, and he used cut-ups along with his colleague Brian Gislin to produce new novels and new ways of working. They used different texts to produce new pieces of work in terms of novels, in terms of placards, in terms of just any way in which they could protest against what was happening in America during the early 1960s. So they were protesting against what was happening to black people, and then with the start of the Vietnam War, they started to use cut-ups to protest and have a counter-culture against the American establishment. For anybody that's kind of interested in music, up here we've got David Bowie, REM and Radiohead. These are all bands that use cut-up techniques to actually come up with song lyrics. So anybody that likes REM particularly, if you look at their best-selling album, Automatic for the People, a lot of the songs on there are produced by them just choosing random words, random pieces of text, cutting them up and putting them together. So if you're a bit startled sometimes by what REM is saying in their lyrics, it's because they've been cut up from all different sources and put back together. So that's kind of what we're going to be doing. There's so many things going on at the moment in ways that are impacting on our lives as disabled people. This is a kind of mixed media collage where you've got somebody, it's outside of art, an image of a woman who's being sick all over the Daily Mail, which I think is a pretty good response. We've got all the headlines there that we expect, scroungers, skivers, we all know what they are. It is a war against us as disabled people. On the other hand, they're giving us the ammunition when we come to doing cut-ups to actually fire something back at them. So it's awful on the one hand, but it's a source of great art, right? This is a cut-up over an image, and this is the kind of thing that we're looking to actually produce today. I just really like this one. It says, "This is a crazy idea, insane. It doesn't make sense. You'll do it." Of course I said. And I think that's what we have to do. We have to be just like the Dadaists and be radical now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, very quickly. Another couple of ways to do this. Blackouts, where you just have a page of text, black out everything except the words that you want to produce a completely new piece of work. Again, second image here, almost the same thing but painted over, so that you take one piece of work and just transform it into something that says what you want it to, something brand new. Again here, same things. This is scribbled out, an entire page almost, except for, I think, 3 words. It says, "Hey mum, I'm still trying. Hope that's okay." Out of a whole page. And I think that's really powerful. Again, just words that have been taken out, just the things left that you want. And it's a really, really strong message doing that. And it's us taking things back and turning them into a message from disabled people. Last of all, for this, Stuart and Alex will be explaining this. Bold is best. Nice, strong images are the ones that work in the most powerful way. This is just a black and red face, and it just says, how true is this? Your body is a battleground. Well, at the moment, as disabled people, I kind of feel it is a war against us, and our bodies are the battleground that's being fought over. And it's time for us to start fighting back. Now, Stuart and Alex are going to explain how we're going to do this. And I have every confidence in them.
Well, with us now is Ellen Clifford from Disabled People Against the Cuts. Thanks very much indeed for coming in to talk to us. I know you were part of this demonstration, not in the House of Commons, but outside. I just wondered why you felt the need to demonstrate, given that the cuts in personal independent payments have been cancelled by the government.
So the U-turn by the government, announced by the new Working Pension Secretary on Monday, was very welcome, obviously, but it doesn't go nearly far enough. So the protest today was to highlight the raft of other cuts that disabled people have suffered since 2010. Disabled people have been hit relentlessly. We're now the first state in the world to be investigated by the United Nations for grave and systematic violations of disabled people's rights. A report from research from the Centre for Welfare Reform showed that disabled people with high support needs have been hit 19 times harder than other people. So we're definitely not all in this together, and the protest today was really to show that we need reversals on other cuts, not least the employment and support allowance cut, which was pushed through by the government at the beginning of the month despite 2 rebellions in the House of Lords. And disabled people today were also saying that they wanted the resignation of the Chancellor, who pushes through tax cuts for the rich on the backs of disabled people.
But Ellen, hasn't the government promised to further increase disability benefits?
I think the question is, where is that money going to? Is it actually going to disabled people, or, as is more the case, going towards funding contracts with discredited companies like Maximus and Atos?
Hold on,
and
do
Capitalism?
you know that, do you? I mean, why? The government would, of course, argue that it is going straight to the disabled people.
Well, if you actually look at their forecasted spending, they're not making the cuts that they actually wanted to. But if we look at the reality of disabled people's lives, if we look at targets for cutting benefits, we see that again and again disabled people are being hit, and there is far less money for example, social care. The social care crisis, the budget shortfall is enormous.
So when David Cameron has said the government is committed to supporting the disabled, are you saying he's lying?
I think that reality shows that what's happened under this government is that disabled people's rights have gone backwards. That's why there was an investigation, and that disabled people have been disproportionately hit. Indeed, Ian Duncan-Smith actually suggested that the reason why cuts were being targeted at poorer members of society, which includes disabled people who are more likely to live in poverty, was because they don't vote for the Conservatives.
Ellen Clifford from Disabled People Against the Cuts. We're grateful for your time. Thanks.
Can you say your name for the camera, please?
My name is Lindsay Curry.
And, how did you come along to the event today then?
It was part of an Eventbrite series on human rights. I'm very interested in human rights, and very interested in disabled persons' human rights. So it was just fit for me. So I decided to sign up and come along.
What do you feel about what you've learned today?
It's been really interesting. It's really good to know that there are people really working hard, groups working hard, advocating for the rights of disabled people. I'm the mother of a profoundly disabled boy, so this indirectly affects me. I feel like I'm disabled by association, and it's something that's not usually spoken about, because my son has PMLD. Every part of his life is affected by disability, and therefore every part of my life is affected by his disability. Disability being the social model of disability, not actually the medical model. It's more about the structural barriers that we are facing. My son in himself is not disabled. The social model was something that was during this sort of civil rights movement and the movement of rights of people. It was a group of disabled men, actually, the UPIS, who advocated for their rights. What they were basically saying was, well, my understanding of it is that it was people who had been disabled during service in America, and had come back from active service and realised that, they couldn't access services the way they used to be able to. I know that there was a motorcycle group. I mean, they couldn't access their motorcycle groups. They had to adapt their motorcycles, and they wanted to move away from this medicalised model of what disability was, where the doctor describes what's wrong with you, and started to look towards what's wrong with society that makes them disabled, because actually it was only structure that was stopping them from accessing a full and happy life. They could do everything they wanted to as long as there were some modifications to the equipment that they used. And so we started to move towards a more social model, and understanding that disability is something that comes along with society. People are not disabled, people are able, absolutely, in everything that they can do. There may be some limitations in society as to what they can do, but people are able, intrinsically people are able to do whatever they can do. They're disabled when society's parameters stop them from accessing, maybe services or swimming or leisure activities, transport, housing, cars, the list goes on. I don't believe that the social model is alive and well. I believe that we're trying. Well, when I say we, I believe that society is trying to be more inclusive. But structurally, I mean, the first problem for anyone who has a profound disability is the accessible toilets, which is classed as changing places. People who are disabled need more than a box to be able to use the toilet. Having a small box and putting a toilet in it and a handrail does not equate to an accessible toilet. My son, for example, would need a hoist. He would need a flat bed. I would need to have the room for both myself and him to get into it. My experience has been that my son has had to lie on the floor of urine-stained floor and have his pads changed, or I've had to leave his wheelchair outside and the door kind of ajar. I've had to put my jacket down on the floor and let my son lie on my jacket, which I've then got to wear with someone else's urine and footprints on it, in order just to change my son so that we can have a day out. And that's using me as the hoist, that's using me as the person that's doing all of the manual handling, all of the manual moving, and the time that it takes. That's just sheer determination to make sure that my son can access a leisure life, a social life, because if I wasn't able to do that, he just wouldn't be able to go out at all. So that to me isn't an accessible society. Well, the right to play, the right to access. My son can't have the right to play if he cannot access. So I took my son skiing. Took him up to the top of the Cairngorm Mountains, and had to change him in the back of my car. So we were driving. We left at quite accessible hotel. We were driving for probably an hour and a half. He needed to be changed before he went on the mountain, and I had to change him in the back of my car, and it was snowing, and it was very, very uncomfortable. So to me, when we've managed to get children skiing down a mountain with the disabilities that he's got, the difficulties, the impairments, whatever you want to say, if we can get them down that mountain but can't get a toilet on the way to the mountain, then that impinges on his right to play. Now that's a basic human right for a child that's enshrined within the Children's Act, that they have the right to play. If we're talking about inclusion, then my son is absolutely excluded. Not because once he's on the mountain, he's surrounded by skiers and everyone's talking, and that's not the problem. The problem is there's no toilet on the way, and if it's not for the determination of people to just actually do this, he wouldn't have been on the mountain that day. He was on the mountain for the first day of skiing, which was incredible and such an achievement for him, and he enjoyed it so much. And something as small as a toilet could have stopped him from accessing that. Yeah. So it's very frightening. very frightening when I think about the cuts that are being made just now to disability benefits. So I am a mum, and I can't work. And the reason I can't work is because my son requires 24-hour care. The bill to look after my son, 24 hours at 2-to-1 care, would be exorbitant. So I am at home and I look after my son, along with some support. But what that means for me is I can't get a mortgage. So I don't have the right to a home. I can't get a mortgage because I can't work. So then I've got to rely on social housing, which is absolutely inappropriate. At this moment in time, I live 4 up in a flat that the lift has broken down on numerous occasions. I've had to ask the fire service to lift my profoundly disabled son up in his wheelchair because I can't risk his health and safety. It's a risk to his life if I drop him whilst walking down the stairs. My son also suffers from refractory epilepsy, so he has seizures that are uncontrollable, and if he has a seizure while I'm trying to carry him 4 flights down a set of stairs, I could drop him and kill him. There are just it would be too much to even start to try and unpick how these services and any cuts to these services will impact on my son and my life. And I really feel that I will end up disabled by the government's cuts, because if I can't get the support, if I can't get the support to lift him, to change him, to do all of the things, his basic human rights, then I'm going to end up hurting my back very severely, and then I'm going to end up disabled physically. I'm already disabled by society. I'm already disabled by I can't access mortgage, can't access a job. You know, I have the right to a life. I have the right to work. I'm an educated person, and I can't do anything with that because the support is not there to allow me. Because the welfare cuts have affected how many hours of, and it's always talked about in terms of hours, how many hours of service I'm entitled to, and that, you know, it's not a babysitting service, absolutely, but if I could go out and work, I wouldn't be relying on the government to provide me with this care. I would be able to do this. I would be able to get a mortgage, which would then I would be able to, you know, make the house accessible for my son. He would be able to play because he would have access to a garden. As it is, he's like 4 up in a block of flats, and if the lift breaks down, he's not getting out. So that affects every part of his life again. I think that I think this will just naturally occur within society, because I think as ethics allow for children to survive who would not have survived before, so we're going to see, and I truly believe that people are only interested in things when it comes to their own back door. We can nod and say, yeah, we're interested, oh yeah, very interested, but when it actually affects people, then they become very interested. And I believe that as society sort of just develops, more and more children will be born with very profound disabilities and different spectrums of disabilities or impairments, and then people will have to modify their attitudes and their behaviour. People don't think, and it's not, but they just don't think. Why would you think? Because it doesn't affect you. So to park on a road, on the pavement where, you know, there's a dip in the curb, you're not thinking about someone's going to need to access that in a wheelchair. They don't think, because they're not in a wheelchair. And usually what happens is whenever anybody who is not physically impaired takes my son out, they're exasperated by the end of it. And they say things along the lines of, I don't know how you manage. And it's like, well, actually, I've got to manage. What do I do? What do I do? And that's tenacity. And sometimes tenacity can be very, very tiring, very, very stressful. And that in itself, with carers, leads to mental health issues. The impact is huge. The impact is huge. It's too much to even start to try and unpick in one conversation. People, ageing population, people are starting to realise with, you know, the ageing population, their parents, and how hard it is to get about in a chair, and, you know, how inaccessible things are. That's for people that are older, who have accessed, you know, all their life they've been able to maybe access areas, shops, and holidays, etc. I'm starting from. This has been 13 years now that I've been doing this stuff since my boy was a tiny wee boy, wee baby, to now he's a 13-year-old boy, and he's a big boy, and going through every part of that. So walking to a shop and having to immediately turn about and go out again, because I haven't got the strength to have another conversation with the people about moving. Could you move these rails so that we can have access here? Could you actually just do as you are obliged by law to do? Because it's exhausting. You can become very angry and bitter. So as people start to experience that, because it will affect more and more people will become exasperated, and I believe that there's power in a collective, and more arenas like this, more forums where there is a mixture of people who are physically disabled. I feel emotionally disabled at times, and just being able to spend time with people who are in the same boat or who are experiencing that, that's a forum, and that's a forum for change. That stuff will change. It starts from trying to get out of the house for some people, just getting out of the house, to trying to access education, to trying to access a job, to trying to access a social life. These are all enshrined within the Human Rights Act, and every single one of them applies to my son, and every single one of them is a battle that I take on myself to do, to make sure, because I know he's entitled to, because I see him as a human. My boy's a human boy, he's entitled to absolutely everything that everybody else is entitled to. Unfortunately, government systems don't see it that way, and it's a tick box. If you're ticking the box, then it looks as though we're doing something. But when you actually start to look at what's being done, I actually see a regression in society. I see a move towards group homes and cuts to benefits. I see us going backwards. So all of the gains that we've made in terms of human rights are slowly being stripped away, and they're being done underhandedly, so that people don't really see what's going on. It's a little bit at a time, slowly saying, oh, that costs so much, it might actually be more beneficial if we put you into a group home. We spent all this time getting people out of group homes, and the atrocities that went on, and we're starting to move backwards. So I think more now than ever, we need as much support as possible to make sure that this can't happen. My son can't speak for himself. And if I end up in a situation where I'm so exhausted I can no longer speak up for him, I hope and pray that there's somebody here to speak up for us. That's it.
What is the UNCRPD? In 2006, the United Nations made a treaty. The treaty is called United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, UNCRPD for short. Many countries have become part of the UNCRPD. The UNCRPD talks about how countries should make sure that people with disabilities have the same rights as others. For example, countries should make sure that people with disabilities can live independently. This means that they should be able to live on their own within the community. Countries should make things accessible to people with disabilities. This means changing things so people with disabilities can use them. For example, by using sign language or by using easy language. Countries should make sure that people with disabilities can make their own decisions. This means that no one else should make these decisions for them. Countries should also make sure that people with disabilities have access to healthcare and can live in safety. The UNCRPD is very important for people with disabilities. This includes people with intellectual disabilities. People with disabilities can use the UNCRPD to make everyone respect their rights.
What they've done is, over the years, is just tagged it on at the coos tail. They've got a policy in place, and then they've equality impact assessed it, put it in place, job done, sorted. Right. But when that reaches us, it's one pile of shite.
Really? So there's lack of, we've talked about that in our report, or the Great Britain report, there's a kind of a lack of consistency in terms of delivering rights when you get them down.
It's because everything in our lives are predominantly decided by middle-aged, middle-class, able-bodied, neurotypical, self-claimed professionals and experts in disability. But the reality of the situation is these people simply haven't got a clue. But they've always had the positions of power. Not till 1968. I know they've just has tweak about the policy and add things at the end. But at down the bottom, when it reaches us, it turns out a pile of shite. And all they've done is got a huge lump of money to look at human rights, soaked all that money up, and delivered. By the time it reaches us, no money left. So it's all
it's
top
like
of the tree.
It's like token gesture.
No, it's not even token gesture.
So
It's embarrassing at the minute. I mean, it's not just embarrassing, it's evil. Some of the things that they're trying to impose and say, that's what you're getting and that's all you're getting. And
it doesn't matter if people are excluded. So like us, the disabled people.
It's no exclusion for this government aiming for, it's extinction. If you can't contribute to society, fitness-wise, in some form or other, you're just not going to be allowed to exist. Just euthanasia by the back door, and the ones that they decide that are fit for some form of work. It's just absolutely disgusting. It's just words. Just fail you enough.
That's why I was saying I felt that it was like token gesture. It's like, oh, we'll just keep somebody, this group happy, and therefore. But you're saying it's not even that.
It's not even. It's just they tick the box away up the top of the tree, and they do an equality impact assessment, and inevitably the people that are doing these jobs, equality and impact assessment managers. I know in Eastern Berkshire, where I stay, is the girl that was appointed the job in 2006. Was just a young girl at university, lovely wee lassie. She just hadn't got a clue. So she had to then start on a course of learning, didn't reach understanding for many years. And 10 years later, she was just starting to get the gist of it and was just starting to make a bit of a difference. And then she left. And then they appointed another wee lassie who's a complete space cadet, and all she's doing is recycling the 10 years work that the other girl done, and that's all out of date now. You with me? There's been umpteen changes since stuff that
high staff turnover in delivery services.
And they pay them sweetie money, The wee girl that was doing it before, when she started, she was on 13,000 a year. When she left, she was on 18,000 a year after 10 years, right? And the new wee lassie that started was on 14,000. And it's only if she produces. She gets a bonus or something that takes her up to 14, but her salary is absolutely minging. New wee lassie, just bread and water.
What can we do? Sorry, this is ending up being an interview, but I'm frustrated because I'm thinking, what can we do?
I really haven't got the answer to that.
No, but unless the top start to recognise that it's not working and the change needs to occur.
Aye, but the human rights and equality is all but non-existent with this government.
Yeah, well, we know that.
And they virtually think that the European human rights is the only human rights that exist. So they're out of Europe, then that's human rights is gone, because of that thick, they don't understand that the laws, human rights law is completely separate from Europe. They're only starting to get that together. That the attorney, what do you call him, the chief law officer guy, has said that.
The Supreme Court.
I've said that what they're doing is no right. So they just retrospectively alter the law to fucking change things, and it's just minging.
So there's the lecture over by Professor Tom Friel. I call him Professor.
Well, I do a spiel.
It just shows you how everything's so interconnected. It's really hard to talk about. It's really hard to talk about one right and then not talk about other rights.
The big problem is especially with human rights and equality and things like that, is that these people that make the decisions simply all they do is they come and they soak our brains. For the last 15 years or something, 17 years. But again, it's inherently in the past. When they give all the pieces of money to organisations that are not DPOs, it's only in recent times that the DPOs are starting to get reasonable amounts of cash to look at things.
That's because we've had to scream. We've had to scream.
Since Sally came along.
Our Chief Executive Officer, Sally, has made a big impact on Inclusion Scotland and disabled people as a whole. So thank you, Sally.
So it's, I don't know what the answer is. So it's not going to get better. It's only going to get worse.
We need
until they get the basic understanding, because all they do is they come and they soak our knowledge, right? And they think that's it. We've spoken to disabled people and they've given us their lived life experience, so we put it in a report, right? But all they're doing is sharing knowledge, right? They've got no understanding of that knowledge, because unless you have understanding of knowledge, it's only reactive, it's not proactive, it doesn't go anywhere, it just goes into a report and
can I say a wee poem? That poem that you suggested, which is, if you always do what you've always done, you will always be what you've always been, and nothing changes.
You have to be the change you want to see in the world. That's dead simple. And they need to get the grasp of the law, right? And it's the Disability Discrimination Act, which became encompassing law in 1995, which made it unlawful for providers of goods, services and employers to treat disabled people less favourably in relation to their disability within the provision of service, not the deliverance of service. A building, a structure, or a person's home or a street is a place of deliverance. It is fucking not, and should never under any circumstances whatsoever be perceived as the right to enter the provision of services. The law says that you must comply with. 2006, with disability equality legislation, we had disability equality legislation where you must give due regard to a person's disability, even if that means more favourable treatment. 2007, with the Opt-in Protocol of the United Nations Convention of Human Rights for Persons with Disabilities. Article 1, Protocol 1, which is universal guiding principle of human rights, says all human beings are born free, they are born equal, they are born with dignity and in rights, they're endowed with reason and conscience to act towards one another in a friendly manner. Well, that just doesn't happen, right? That is one pile of shite at the delivery end, or the outcomes, and they all tick the boxes, and they all say, we're all doing this, and they're all doing that. But when it all lands on us, en masse, it's just one pile of shite. It's disgusting what they're doing and what they're perceiving as equality and human rights. And that's what needs to change. Right at the start of the process, the perceptual thinking, right, that we all have, because everything we do in life, no matter what we do, and without exception, starts with a thought. And how we perceive that thought is relevant to how we deliver that thought. And the essential mechanism an immense gift that we're all gifted with at birth, but the limits of that thought is our bodies. And the human body is a biological, mechanical, hydraulic, electric, pneumatic process. On top of that biomechanical, hydraulic, electric, pneumatic process, we have a 3-pound lump of grey matter called the brain. From that brain, we have 72 essential service lines of communication that service our central nervous system and our peripheral nervous system. And all those systems within systems are encompassed in water. And water is the core of our life. If you look after the water, the rest will look after itself. And we are what we eat, quite literally, and we become what we eat, quite literally. So we look after the basics, and the rest will look after itself. And if you look at your body, like the engine in your car, works on the same principles: compression, ignition, power, exhaust. If all those component parts within that engine don't work in harmony, then it simply doesn't work. And the human body is exactly the same. And when you become disabled, you have to get yourself in a situation, and it can only be done from in here by changing your perceptual thinking and making adjustments within your life, like a wheelchair, that everybody's fearful of. Nobody wants to be in a wheelchair. But in this wheelchair, I can go faster, I can go further, and I can go a hell of a lot longer than you can in your pair of legs, and I don't get tired,
Really, a lot of the problems that we've highlighted in our report are the result of the fact that human rights are not the starting point when we come up with policies.
But that's what they revolve their perceptual thinking around, as the Human Rights Act. We need to comply with that. So they need to tweak their policies to comply with that. But by the time they've tweaked them, it just becomes a bigger pile of shite, because they haven't looked at it through the eyes of the law, which says quite clearly and categorically that everything you do as a statutory right of service, you must do looking through the lens of equality and human right. No up its arse, right? And that's the problem, that they're all looking at human rights up the arse of human right, not at the start of the process. They're looking at the end of the process. And it's a cheap way of amending their policies and just equality impact and assessing that policy. That will never, ever, ever, ever work, right? It's never worked since Christ was a wee boy, and it'll never work ever. They need to take a wee step back, and it's no hard. It doesn't cost a fortune, because all they need to do is change the way they think. Because only when they think differently will they talk differently. And when they talk differently, then they'll start to act differently. And see, when they start to act differently, then they'll start to make a difference to disabled people's lives. Right? And it's as simple as that. It's no fucking rocket science, But they treat it as rocket science, And it's until they actually take the people with physical life experience, knowledge and understanding of the condition, take that and adapt that into their policy at the start of the process, right? And again,
that's common sense.
Aye, but it's no common sense to all these people that are, because all their policy tracks simply follow in money. What they've been told to do for particular amount of money, and that's what they do, and they've done it for years and years and years. They'll find a lump of money, give it to an organisation to produce outcomes and aims and objectives and finally outcomes, and they'll charge you off with their mad ideas. They'll get halfway through, 3/4 of the way through, or the end of the project, and think, oh, that's not going according to plan. So they just bin it and start over again, right? And somebody else gets the funding. Or it's an organisation that does an excellent job over that 3 years of funding, then all of a sudden the funding's gone and the organisation goes away. So they start over again. And the thing that they're starting to do is a housing report, for disabled people. They'll try to reinvent the wheel. The Inclusion Scotland in 1998 and 2008 done a very extensive report on housing for disabled people. It was shown in front of all the MSPs. They made a DVD and it was circulated to every councillor in the country, and it did start to make a difference, but there was no momentum attached to it to follow it through. So now, a couple of years after that, Capability Scotland got the money to do a report in disabled housing. And all they done was copy Inclusion Scotland's report, produce another pile of shite, took another lump of money out of the government, and now some other organisations got it as well, to do another report. And it's in 2008, there was 96,000 short of disabled housing, wheelchair accessible housing. It's probably in the 150,000 now, and probably more. So what's changing? It's only getting worse. And they say it's all down to money. It's not down to money. It's about getting it right the first time instead of repeating the mistakes of the past continually. But anyway, I've run out of steam. I'm knackered now. You go for a lie down. Huh? Just you're living in a pile of shite, and it's like a big flipping bath of shit, and you try to flip and crawl your way out it, and there's so many disabled people, and never get out of that hole, when they get stuck in it, especially if they get stuck into service provision, they're just their whole life's taken over, and they need to do what they can do, when they can do it, if they can do it, and it's just minging, and it's not that they're bad people. It's just the way systemically it's fucked up, and it's just continue because that's the way it's always been, and that's the way it's going to always be. And they change things, but don't change it enough.
I mean, I'm guessing you've filled out a few bits of paperwork and forms in your time.
Aye. When I could write, I can't write, so I can talk for Scotland. Most days, aye. But it's so I'm more or less retired for everything now. I've had cancer in my lungs and in my thingy, so I'm terminal. So I'm just every day the pulse goes. You just got up going with it, and that's all you can do. One day at a time, one thing at a time. Just going on with it, because it was 2002. I lost control of all my bodily functions. Couldn't walk, couldn't talk, couldn't hold a conversation. I was double incontinent. I was told to never work again. They tried to put me into a nursing home, which was a fucking mental asylum. Bonko House in Wishaw, locked unit. I was seriously scary, man. Seriously scary. I'm no fucking shitting you. I wish I was.
What do you think is important? What are people missing? Why is this important?
It's seriously important because we're watching thousands of people being killed. Practically, it's like culling, And where they cull seagulls, it's like this government are actually culling disabled people, Thousands of people are being sanctioned, having their money stopped. Eventually being put out of their house, where do they go? Who helps them? We didn't seem to have the backing for other equality and human rights commissions there. Where are they? What are they doing practically? We've seen Trump in a different country bringing in racial issues and thinking about immigrants and everything like that. You've seen not just the fully Scotland, you've seen England, you've seen every country across the world taking to the street for a campaign against that. Well, I would have been one of them, But we're being killed en masse, and we're out there every demo and everything that we turn up to, between 5 and 20 people turn up because many people are too old to take to the streets. We get that. We've give information to for the film My Daniel Blake, which is absolutely fantastic. People are gone watching. I'm reading on Facebook and everything that folk are in their community centres having a greet and everything, but then why is there no bloody outrage now that they actually ken what's happening? The whole of the country needs to get behind us. I said years ago that the government was going to split and divide for to conquer all, and that it didn't matter if you were young, you were old, you were working, you were non-working, you were black, you were white. We had to seriously stand together and fight together for every affected person. We all have to unite, and it's still not happening. We're still out there on our own. Ken, how much more can folk take, Ken, folk are taking their life and they're on the phone to you all the time saying they want to jump off a bridge, they can't take any more. Ken, look, everything's, it's not just folks' benefits that's been cut, Ken, they're stressed to the max. Ken, the council didn't have money in their budgets. Folk are getting 2.5 benefits and they're ending up in mental health units. It's no making anything any better for folk, Ken, they're going on one hand about, let's get everybody back to work. On the other hand, they're bloody putting everybody out to work through capability. So how do you justify where are they getting folk the jobs? Who's giving them the jobs? I want a job, give me a job. Sorry, Ken, what I mean, I'm now looking for a job. I'm fed up being self-employed and fighting every day for another contract or another bit of work. Now I go out and earn a living one way for to support people with different disabilities so I can help them. But we just need an ordinary life. We're not asking for very much, but where's our human rights? Because right now they're being flushed in the toilet. The same as everybody else's. It isn't just us. They're attacking everybody. But we'll have to unite, and until we unite, and not just shut London down, we need to shut the Scottish Parliament down too. They all need to be shut down because loads of folk could be doing loads of different things for us, And I'm absolutely fed up to the back teeth, getting told every day in life it's always the same thing. There's never enough money for when it comes to something you need. It's always about money. There's loads of things that didn't cost money. What I mean? People seriously have to unite and get behind everybody in their community. That's the only way we'll fight the government.
So how long have you felt these issues have been issues? I mean,
these issues have been a long time. I mean, we had the WOW campaign, we had Pat's petition and everything for to stop the WCA, but all the benefit testing and everything. It's bullying and harassing folk to death, and it's seriously harassing folk to death. They're having their benefits cut and then there's nothing left. What have they got? What can they do? And there's just nobody, very little people out there. Oh, it's great when everybody says, oh, we've got to support you, we've got to support you. We're still the same people sitting in the same rooms, fighting for the same things 17 years on. There is some difference. I'm not saying there isn't. But in the last 10 years, my God almighty, we're backtracking. What I mean? Every right that we fought for, they're diluting or taking off us.
So you mentioned some campaigns there. Can you tell me about those campaigns?
Yeah, we had a WOW petition, and that was to stop the work capability assessments. Ken and Harrington himself that brought them in eventually came back and said I was really wrong, we got this wrong. I met the ACTOS doctors at an event and said you never considered for a minute folk with mental health issues or learning disabilities. Somebody says to them, did you eat your dinner that day? They might say aye. Did you get dressed today? Can you dress yourself? They might say aye. But do they actually ken that they can? Do they actually ken that they've had their dinner some days? Ken what I'm saying, There was loads of things that they never took into consideration, And all the changes that they're bringing in behind closed doors that are meant to go through the Parliament. Welfare reform was put through the Parliament in different stages, and we fought that and challenged it. And we didn't get the best, but we done as much as we could by getting some amendments, But behind closed doors, they're bringing in different bits of legislation and changing it all again and making it more difficult, And how can the latest bit is, how can they turn around and say that anybody with mental health issues anymore should just be able to stay in the house and take medication, they didn't need PIP or anything? It's just disgusting, absolutely disgusting, They didn't have a clue what affects people and how it affects their life, So many folk out there absolutely terrified of their wee brown letters stoating through the door, terrified to go to the assessments. Half the people's forms that I've read when they've came back and says to me, Susan, I've got my assessment, they've found me fit for work. Here, have a look at that. It's like they've picked it out of a hat, because it doesn't resemble the people that I know, And it's just heartbreaking, I'm struggling every day with my own thoughts because it's eating me, what they're doing to people. I don't want to stop.
you.